No, we're finding out in 2 cars, and we know about it for like 3 years, didn't we? So why don't we keep going? Only 2 of us.
Janice, are we live? You are. All right, just 1 minute. 1 minute. All right, ready. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the Town of Camden Select Board meeting for August 23rd, 2022. As always, as a preface, we are live stream on YouTube, channel 1303 Spectrum, and in addition, we have a link for a webinar link through Zoom. That link can be found on the town's website under Select Board meetings, and it's listed on our agenda if you'd like to connect. In terms of a Zoom connection, to give the same rights and responsibilities to those who are on Zoom, and that specifically means do not use the chat function. We're not going to monitor it. Secondly, if you want to say something or address a question, you do have the Q&A function. We cannot guarantee that we're going to be able to address all the Q&A questions that may come up, but if you really want to participate like the people here do, raise your hand and I will try to get you on Zoom to address any questions or comments you may have. With that, we will start our agenda as always with the first item being, does anyone from the public have a comment on a non-agenda item? Not seeing any hands, I'm going to faint. Let's go on to item 2, which is the approval of the board minutes from August 9th, 2022. Does anybody on the board have any comments on those or a motion to accept?
A motion to accept.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you. Before we get to item 3, which started, it's a public hearing for some licenses. Is there anybody here representing any one of these entities that will be speaking to any one of these hearings? And I'll tell you in a minute why I'm asking. Normally, a public hearing, for the purpose of public hearing, is for the public to be able to comment on the matters at hand, whether for, against, or just comment to the item. And normally I would allow anybody from the public to speak to each one of the items if they'd like. And then when the public is finished, we would.
Sorry. So Michelle Peacock is here from Blue Harbor House.
She's here?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm reading the comment from
who?
Zoom.
From which one?
From Zoom.
Oh, she's Blue Harbor. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much. I'm glad I'm making a speech then. We will allow anybody, including Michelle, to speak to the item. And after everybody's spoken, then I will close discussion from the public and revert to a select board decision on the matter. There'll be no more discussion at that point with the public unless a select board member has a question of somebody who's previously spoken. Having said all of that, the first item we have is the Blue Harbor House Inn at 67 Elm Street for a Class 5 bed and breakfast liquor license. If you want to bring Michelle on board, she can certainly speak to that if she'd like. There she is. She has her hand raised. There you are, Michelle. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Did you want to make a comment regarding your liquor license?
No, obviously we enjoyed being part of this community and have served our guests our liquor, with our liquor license. But I don't really have much to say. I'm just here to just make sure everything is good. If you guys need me for anything, I'm here.
Great. Well, we do appreciate when we get to see some faces on these matters of licenses. It's just nice to put a name with a face, especially with our businesses. So with that, I'm going to close the public discussion and revert to select board deliberation on the Blue Harbor House Inn. Class 5 bed and breakfast liquor license. Comments, board, questions, or a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? 5-0. Congratulations, Michelle. Great to see you. To the second item, since there's no one here, I'm going to the Camden House of Pizza at 12 Mechanic Street for a Class 1 restaurant liquor license. I'm going to revert to a select board discussion or motion on that item.
A motion to approve?
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you. And lastly, Select Board, we have a Quarry Hill at 30 Community Drive for a Class 1 restaurant liquor license. Any discussion or motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve?
Second?
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you. The fourth item on the agenda is for the consent agenda, and I'll read them. Is first, a request to approve the following Vittler license and lodging license renewals for A Little Dream and the Lodge at Camden Hills. And the second item is the approval of a block party for Maple Street residents on Sunday, August 28th from 5 to 10 p.m. Are there any objections to the items on the consent agenda? Not hearing any, those items are hereby adopted. To our fifth item, which is action items, we have, the first item is this, would you bring Bill on, please? Is the action to approve the Montgomery Dam resolution, which is in our packet. Bring Bill Kelly on,
Yeah,
just in case we have
he's-
any questions.
I've-
Is he there? Yeah, there he is.
Hello.
Hello, Bill, how are you?
Thanks.
Audra, do you have any intro you want to make here? We have it in our packet. I know you drafted and commented with Bill on this resolution for the board.
Yes, so there was some discussion about, just concern that the select board might take an action in regards to the Montgomery Dam without, having approval from voters. So the whole idea behind this resolution is just, stating all of, the things that are being done in regards to the Maguntacook River project and, the steps that need to be taken. And ultimately, it's stating that the voters of Camden are the ones who have the authority to make any final decisions about what's done with the dam in terms of the wording that we're using is any substantive alteration, renovation, or repair of the dam. So this resolution would just make it very clear that the select board understands that and is going through a process, and that process, ultimately will be culminating in voter approval.
Okay.
Would it be worthwhile to read that language, or? I don't know.
It's in the packet. I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, fundamentally, it's trying to reinforce what, at least I believe we've been trying to make everybody confident, and that is that we won't be making any decisions without going through the voting process. And there aren't many other ways to do it anyway, but let's just reinforce that, puts it in writing, and puts a hard stake in the ground. And I think I read it, and I think it's pretty straightforward and accurate. I think you did a great job in writing it. Does anybody else on the board have a question on it or a comment? Alice, Tom, why don't you go first?
Question is, and I've lost the section,
Oh,
but it is about repair. So as I understand it, we're basically reiterating this is a town asset, and therefore we need, voter approval to significantly alter, remove. But the one that caught my attention most is repair. That dam is in physical disrepair at this point, and I think we need to make sure that there's a provision there, given that any adjustments we're going to make to this dam are going to go through the DEP, the Army Corps of Engineers, and other entities, I'm sure, that we're not just leaving it in this physical condition for an undetermined amount of time while we go through this
right, well,
process.
first of all, this item is about a resolution for any changes or modifications to the dam are going to go through the voters. That's what the issue at hand is, not the physical condition of the dam, although that's about, well, no, it's not what the.
No, it's relevant.
This resolution says that we would go before the voters for any funding for any, et cetera, including repair. We need budget to repair anything. So you were suggesting a rewording of the resolution?
No, I just want to make sure that we're very clear about this preserve, modify, or remove. There is, I think that that dam is in, the physical condition of that dam, I believe, I'm not down there every day, but I think you can see exposed breaking concrete, maybe even some reinforcing steel or rebar in it that might be exposed. I can't say for certainty, but I do know that it doesn't look great right now. And as I understand it, this process is going to take a while, the river project. And I think that we need to consider who has the authority to, does this still give the select board authority to appropriate funds to repair the dam?
So that would occur through the annual budget process. So, that all goes through the budget committee, goes through the select board, and then to voters for, significant funds to do any repairs to the dam.
And there is oversight in that regard in terms of some of the agencies you recommended also. We can't bypass any regulations or requirements from federal, state, or local agencies. Allison, did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, so I think that's a really important point to talk about, what counts as a substantive repair or modification. Reading the inspection reports, there's nothing that's been identified that presents a hazard. They're aesthetic things. That's what first got us here to begin with, that aesthetic repair of the spillway. And if that were something that we could just send a town staff person out to make look a little better, I would definitely support that. But the cheapest thing that they came up with was well over what had been budgeted. So it was, it was like $70,000 for one option and $84,000 for the other, which was, both of those things were over budget. And that didn't, that was just the primary aesthetic concern, and didn't look at all at, any of the masonry repairs or any of the, structural components of the dam or the gate or, so I think that we should have a conversation about some of the, little things that might be able to be done to improve the visual, whether it be like vegetation or pruning or, different things that we could do to make it look a little bit better. But every single year since since I've been on the board, these concerns come up around this time of year when water's really low, that it doesn't look good. And then it goes back to, a bunch of water coming down and everybody's sort of delighted again. I would take issue a little bit with the idea that, oh, well, we can just repair it and that will go through the budget process, because I think some of this has been that, even partial removal could have gone through the budget process before, determining what, that's what, and that's just the Montgomery Dam and Seabright that are all together in one line. And so voters had appropriated, something like $60,000 total in that line for both Montgomery and Seabright. And that had gone through the budget approval process. But the average person, when they go to vote, they're not aware, they don't want to have to vote on the Montgomery Dam and Seabright together. And then, of course, it's all lumped into some bigger thing. So I think, for me, the purpose of this resolution was to try to make it so that people don't have to, whether it be for removal or anything, you don't have to wonder if some major thing is kind of hidden somewhere in the budget.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a really important
Because we've been
point.
saying, oh, well, we're going to vote on it, but I think people understandably didn't have the full trust that, because how many times have we all voted on things that we didn't realize we were voting on because it was in the budget somewhere?
Yeah, that's a good point, Allison.
I don't know that there are repairs that could be made that wouldn't take a major budget appropriation and shouldn't go, if there was something big, we could go to and do a special town meeting, I suppose. But I guess, what are you thinking of in terms of a repair that could happen with just our authority?
Allison, this item is a discussion of a resolution. If somebody wants to reword the resolution, I want to hear that as part of this item, not your point about the purpose of the resolution. I totally agree with. There's ways that sometimes a budget process can mask getting something done on 2 dams because it's bucketed in a certain, this clarifies that. Again, any comments on the resolution as it stands?
Well, can't we talk about what the resolution means? Isn't that?
What resolution, you clarified that it doesn't talk, it's preventing the possibility of going, or perceived of going around and getting some change to it without, because it's not clear in the budgeting process. What else do you want to clarify? We're not talking about what needs to be modified now. We're not talking about when it's going to be modified. We're talking about the process to do anything to it. Does it need to be clarified?
What counts as a repair? I think Tom's asking a good question. Are there things that the select board can authorize? Because we might not want this to be used as a reason that we can't just,
let me turn that question over to,
pull some weeds out or something.
let me turn that question over to Bill Kelly. Bill, you heard the comment. What's your opinion? Did you hear the question about
resolution?
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Bill.
The resolution does not limit the select board to do the normal things that it might do, nor does it limit what might be appropriated for repair or whatever in the next budget cycle, as Audra just mentioned. It is essentially a neutral statement that is intended to clarify some of the confusion that has taken place for several months, that the select board is without authority to preserve, modify, or remove the dam. And this resolution was seen as a nice, simple vehicle to sort of condense what many of you have been saying, and I've been saying for some time, but it isn't intended as a limiting action or to replace any of your normal deliberations about anything. It is what it is.
Right.
It was intended to be neutral. That's why it has those 3 phrases, those 3 words in terms of preserve, modify, or remove. That pretty much covers everything. And this document was only drafted, or was drafted, by Audra and myself. So it was done internally. And hopefully that answers your question, Allison, but that's my summary.
Okay.
Could a minor repair be considered a preservation? I know I'm parsing words.
This resolution does not limit what you may decide to do in the normal course of sort of the maintenance of all public facilities, maintenance. Mm-hmm. So if there's something that needs to be maintained, as Audra just said, it'll be budgeted and it'll be voted on.
Right. Right. So the answer is no.
Sure, and it's voted on. I'm satisfied with that. It's voted on by the voters.
Any other comments on the resolution language? Motion to accept?
I'll make a motion to accept.
What's in discussion? Second? Thanks, Tom. Comments?
Yeah, so are we
I
accepting?
want to put your microphone closer to your.
Sorry. So my question is more of a process question. Are we accepting the draft, or are we accepting the draft as the final resolution, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. What's the option?
Well, no, because it's presented as a draft. So voting on a draft means.
It'll become not a draft.
But then do we vote on a non-draft? So once we approve this text, it becomes final. There's not 2 votes. Okay.
That is correct,
Thank you.
Sophie. That's a very good point.
I've been drowned in drafts in my work
Allison,
this
another question.
week, so I'm confused.
So
Comment.
just so as to not be prevented from fixing any typos, there was somewhere where something was stated twice. It was like, where is it? It was like just the same 3 words were said. Did anybody else see that? It's grammatical.
Do you want to find it later in some?
Yeah,
if it's
sure.
something that you think is stated twice, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's like it's more of a,
Oh,
it's a copy editing issue. It's not a,
well, why don't you find it and
maybe I can revisit it by the end of the meeting.
Yeah. Any other discussion, board?
No.
All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you very much. We're going to modify the agenda slightly with the board's permission because the next item, which is the discussion on the potential river quality testing program, is related to the discussion we're having tonight with FB Environmental. I wonder if you could bring on for us, please, Allison, for a discussion. This is basically a discussion from a formal introduction to the public of FB Environmental, our consultant on the Montgomery River project, and also an update on where we are at in the process of our advisory task force, what we're calling it, et cetera. So, Forrest, would you introduce yourself? And I believe you have some PowerPoint slides, I presume they are, and you want to share your screen, that's fine.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Happy to have this opportunity to present. And I only have about 15 slides. It's a little bit of an introduction, and then a quick update on the project we're helping the town with. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Can you see that okay, or do I need to change the setting?
It'd be better if you put it in.
Presentation?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that again.
Put it in the presentation mode on the lower right side of the, there's a little.
How's that?
That's perfect.
All right. Great, thank you. So yeah, this is an update on the Montgomery River Advisory Committee Development Project. Just as many of you might know already, I am the founder, owner, and CEO of FB Environmental. We've been in business for 21 years. My background is in water resources and watershed planning. And Maggie Mills is not on today. She's enjoying her time away on a postponed honeymoon, but Maggie will be very involved in the project and has a similar background, watershed management, community planning, and hydrology, and has done some similar work in the area. And we are truly the two main staff people from FB Environmental working on this project, which is somewhat unique for me. I generally work in the background, but this is an interesting and important project, so I'm going to be spending a fair amount of time on it. So just an introduction. I know we responded to an RFP, so I'll go fairly quickly through this, but I thought it would be good for the town to know a little bit about who we are in case you haven't heard of FB Environmental. I mentioned we've been around since 2001. We're based in Portland, and we have a second office in Dover, New Hampshire. We're a small business, so I've been a small business owner for 21 years and understand a lot of what small business owners face in this world as well. So we work mostly in Maine and New Hampshire, but we have worked in all 6 New England states and New York and a little bit in Canada. And the piece I want to emphasize on this slide is that we often work where science meets civics. And I think that's important with the work we're doing for you. That's, we do the work on the science and the assessment, and sometimes it's very complex. And then a lot of our job is to translate that science to help inform policy for towns, states, federal governments. And it's been my personal feeling that there's often a gap there between the science and policy making. And, I work hard and we work hard to bridge that gap. Just a little bit about our approach. I think it's better to talk about this than to read about it in a proposal or a report. This is important because this has really been a theme we've worked around in many communities in the region for many years, and it's the part of the work I enjoy the most is working in communities. And it's all about finding the balance, in my humble opinion. If you look at the graphic on the left, many hundreds of years ago, the land was undeveloped, and the graphic in the middle, we came and we developed, and we, didn't necessarily understand the impacts to natural resources. And, it's our belief as a company, and me personally and professionally, with the graphic on the right, that you can work together and find that balance between economic growth, environmental protection. It's there. I've seen it work many times, and it's really, again, important in my opinion. A lot of the work we do as a company is boots on the ground work, so it's not just policy work or writing documents. We have staff out in the field every day, and part of that is to inform the science. So a lot of training in the different areas that we work on, whether it's wetlands or watershed management or looking at turtle habitat in the middle. These are all types of projects we do, and we like to see the site and really sort of get down in and learn as much as we can with the boots on the ground approach. And then just really quickly, some comparable projects that we've worked on. They're somewhat related, somewhat different, but we do a broad array of work as a company, day in and day out. And we're working as part of a team on a multi-year project, probably 18 months to 2 years, to update the comprehensive plan for Bar Harbor. So again, another coastal community, plenty of issues that we're addressing there. And, our job is really to do the natural resource focus of that project. So we, travel a fair amount to Bar Harbor as well. Also climate change work and looking at sea level rise and what this might mean, and whether it's the economic impacts or the environmental impacts. And we're working with Brunswick, we're working with Gouldsboro, Harpswell, so working on several communities to assess these sorts of issues. And I called this environmental planning, I think, if you had to give it a category. Another really important part of our work is we often serve as sort of the go-between between environmental agencies and industry. And the types of industries, we worked a lot with the lobster industry through Maine, and especially in the last 3 or 4 years, and also with the shellfish industry. And we've worked in many communities to help them do the assessment work to reopen shellfish beds around the state. And the pictures here on this map are in Harpswell, and we had a nice article on News Center 6 that you can find out online, and that's Maggie Mills on the right in the photo that hopefully you'll get to meet soon. So here's the part that you really want to hear about, and I'm going to be fairly brief, but before I do that, I just want to quickly, this is sort of take a step back, and having worked with rivers for about 30 years of my career, and had a fair amount of training and always learning, and always have more to learn, is when we look at river management, and you can apply this to the Megunticook for sure, it's really important to look at chemical, biological, and physical attributes to the river and what is happening, and really doing a deep dive and understanding all these factors. And it's not just the river corridor, but it's the watershed and everything that drains into the river. One thing I'll mention, and I know there's a proposal on the agenda, is the chemical piece, and the chemical and biological data for the Megunticook is extremely limited. And when we started our gap analysis, which is part of the project, that jumped out at me within the first 10 minutes of our work. So that is the impetus for the proposal that we'll talk about in a little bit. So the chemical, looking at oxygen levels, nutrients, what's happening, what is the health of the river? And I like to say, you go to the doctor, you get your blood test, you get your blood pressure test. I look at it the same as if it's a river or a lake or an estuary that we work on. You really need these vital signs to understand. And like the human body, it's complex, everything's interacting, and it's really important to understand the connections there and what they mean and what the data mean. And then biological, the critters that live in the river, that live around the river, including, us, right, humans, and, what is happening in the watershed, as far as the biological processes. Can fish live healthfully in the river? Things of that sort. And then the physical piece, I would say this science has really evolved more in the last half century, whereas chemical and biological have been around for a while. So this is, geomorphology is a fancy word you may have heard before, but that's looking at the physical process of a river and, how rivers change and move over time. So there's a lot of geology involved in that. And the picture in the photo is a project we're working on in the Saco River, the upper Saco River. That's in Conway, New Hampshire. And you can see the sediment deposits. And that river has actually moved dozens of feet, hundreds of feet over even the last 100 years or so. Just to give you, a lot of people don't understand that rivers are dynamic and can often move over time, and often, we have impacts on that we need to try to understand. So an update on the project is the contract was signed just about 2 weeks ago between FB Environmental and Camden. So this is still, a new project for me, a new project for us. We right now reviewing the existing plans. This is all part of our scope of work, the background, the research, and then really taking that comprehensive look at the watershed. And part of that is the gap analysis, which is, where are the gaps in the data? Where are the gaps in the information? And that's going to take some time to sort through, but hopefully it's a positive that we are giving this a fresh look. Also now currently in the process of developing the structure and starting to collect names for the advisory committee. I've been engaging in some conversations and research around this, and my last slide and a couple slides will have an email address that interested applicants can send to me, and I'll go over that in just a minute or two. The goal is to form the advisory committee by September 5th with the first meeting in late September for those that are interested in that. And then, my last point here is a very important one, that it's, there's still much to learn and assess, certainly from our standpoint, and, one step at a time, and I bold-faced listening. And I feel that that's a lot of my job and our job in this project, working for you, working for the town of Camden, is to listen. And, I have many conversations that need to still happen and lots of listening to do. And again, that's I just want to reiterate, that's the number one job is to listen and, not form opinions, and hear what folks have to say. And that, that will happen in the advisory committee format, certainly. And this is, more or less of a draft statement that I came up with. The purpose of the advisory committee, this is not a mission statement, this is just a purpose statement, is to provide recommendations to the select board to engage with the community stakeholders, grant funding agencies, and provide a due diligence process to advance viable options for preserving, improving sustainability, and recommending resiliency outcomes for the Megunticook River and the watershed. Now that's a draft, and the advisory committee will mold this into more of a mission statement, but I thought that was important for people that are interested in being part of the advisory committee, knowing what the purpose is. And that's it for the slides. So what I'm asking is to submit names and a brief background statement, no more than a paragraph, on what is your connection to the river. Are you a Camden resident? What is your background, albeit professional or community? And email that to me. That'll come directly to me by September 1st. So, and that email address is McGuntacookRiver@fbenvironmental.com. And I can leave that up there for a minute for folks. And
Thank you, Forrest. Thank you, Sophie.
Yeah, Forrest, thank you so much for the presentation. So a couple of things. People who have already submitted their names, do they need to resubmit, or do you already have them in your roster?
Yeah, I have between 12 and 15 names that have already been submitted, and most folks have actually just submitted some background information anyways, but I will circle back to those that haven't.
Okay. So that was my first question. The second thing is, we'll put the, Forrest just updated the slide deck, and we'll put it up on the town website in the Megunticook River project space, where everybody could find also his email address and send expressions of interest. It's not an academic process. It's really, if you're interested, if you have, if you want to be part of this committee, please send him that application. Forrest, thank you so much for the presentation. I think it's really interesting to see the background and the work that FB has been doing in river management. The last thing I wanted to share also is that we've been giving Forrest a lot of documents that we have accumulated at the town, because there's a lot of studies that have already been done. So Maggie and Forrest are in the process of parsing through those documents as part of their gap review analysis. So it's even though we signed a contract 2 weeks ago, they had already started working, and I'm really thankful that they were not holding us up to a very tight deadline. The last thing is we're still working on the last version of the work plan, because it has to be moved within the period of the contract we had set up. But so people should not be alarmed to hear that we'll have meetings at the end of September. We're just shifting the work plan a little bit further, so we'll have plenty of time to work with Forrest and his group on this first project.
Okay. Thank you, Sophie. Well, the reason why I moved, did you guys have something?
Just a brief thing about membership on the committee. I noticed that you said in the inquiry to answer whether you're a Camden resident or not, have you given any thought to whether that would be a prerequisite? My instinct is to think that we're undertaking a watershed level process, and that there may be significant value to having people, somebody might have a lot to contribute even if they're not a Camden resident. A
good question, a fair question. I don't know if I have a definite recommendation along those lines. I think it was more of just, it's important to know that, if you are a Camden resident, if not a Camden resident, and my plan is to submit recommendations to you, to the select board, before your September 5th meeting, and that would include a recommendation should you be a Camden resident or a watershed resident. So still thinking about that.
Okay, but people who are not necessarily Camden residents could go ahead and submit an inquiry. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Just as a clarification, our next meeting is September 6th. September 5th is Labor Day.
Oh, okay. So the 5th was my deadline then.
I understand. But one of the other questions, the reason why I moved Forrest up, because it relates to the next item on our agenda, which is this authorization to expend, I believe it's $54,000 for the Megunticook River Water Quality Testing Program. As you said, you started the gap analysis, and this one stood out like a sore thumb, which I get. I guess from your perspective, can you describe why you see this as a priority now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Montgomery River is classified by the state of Maine as a Class B river. And it's really, when I looked into the data for Maine DEP, some of the data relating to oxygen levels and temperature, which are, really kind of the basic kind of core standards. When I talked about blood pressure, it's sort of like your blood pressure check for the river. There really wasn't anything since 2011, which is, a long time, and these are critical data. The reason I put forth a proposal so quickly when we noticed that is because we would miss 2022 sampling if it didn't start in early September. August, September, and a little bit of October are the critical periods. And that's not just, me saying that as a scientist, that's the state of Maine puts that forth. There's, language along those lines of that's, a really critical period to be collecting the dissolved oxygen and temperature. And the proposal is basically working with these data loggers that are about this big. They look like a small torpedo, and they're continuously collecting data, every 15 minutes. So you'll have a really robust data set even by the end of 2022.
Okay. Other questions on the study? Because the 54,000, as you see from the proposal, includes the equipment as well as labor. It's not $54,000 for labor. The only reason, typically or not, wouldn't the gap analysis reveal other scopes of work that may be required for this, should be done for this effort? And in that regard, if we did it this September or next, would it make a big difference in timing in your mind?
It would. And the reason being is part of the proposal is a $10,000 task to do what's called a QAPP, a QAP we call it. It's a Quality Assurance Project Plan. And that is sort of kind of a gap analysis in much more detail for the other parameters and the other things that need to be monitored for the river. So I guess my point being in the professional judgment is that dissolved oxygen and temperature, the sooner we know and the more we know now, the better. The other parameters are a little more complicated and really need to be teased out, and the advisory committee can certainly help with that process.
Mm-hmm. I guess what I hear you saying is that if we do this piece of the gap, thank you. If we do this piece of the gap analysis now, it'll help us better clarify the other components of the gap analysis requirements? Yeah,
so dissolved oxygen and temperature, the way rivers are classified in the state of Maine, it's mostly based on dissolved oxygen and E. coli bacteria. And there are some bacteria data available for the river, and there have been a few issues along those lines, but not dissolved oxygen data. So that will tell us a lot about, the overall health of the river, which, is really unknown. And the data that are 10 years old, and I'm sorry if I'm getting too deep into the weeds, but the data that are 10 years old are really grab samples or meter samples. So you go out there and just kind of quickly take it, and the technology has really evolved since then.
Thank you, Forrest. Audrey, I've opened up the board for more questions, but funding for this, have you identified where that can come from?
Yes, so the Montgomery River Reserve account that, $30,000 was budgeted for FY23 into that account, and we already had about 12,000. So we have 42,000 in that, and it would be, like a few other projects that we've done recently.
I'm sorry, you said it'd be 42,000 available?
Total, yeah. But what we've done in occasions like this where, we have an appropriate reserve account that, corresponds to the project that you're looking at.
Sure.
Just spend it into the red, and then going into FY24, we'd look at making up that balance.
Got it. got it. So that would be, so you're only short 12K.
Yes.
Board questions. Tom, you have your hand up.
What would be some other potential uses for a McGuntacook River Reserve account?
I don't think it's called, you mean the river or habitat restoration?
It might be called
Is that the
habitat
money that was going to be
restoration.
used for Midcoast Conservancy?
Yeah, it was, funding that could have
think
been
it
used
is.
for,
I think it is.
hiring
Because I
a
think that we,
project partner or something like
Yeah,
that.
just so everybody understands, Midcoast Conservancy was a prior consultant we had been consulting with, and we didn't spend all that money. Is that correct? That's
right,
that's my understanding.
right, the person that was doing it left the organization.
Right, right.
So,
We've talked about, Allison's identified some debris on the side of McGuntacook River near the tannery, old tannery lot. Would that also be something that we could use in McGuntacook Reserve, or what, I'm sorry, the name of the account, is that a similar type use for that type of money?
Yep, we could use it for that purpose.
Okay.
I think, it was set up not too long ago, and it was mostly for professional services, associated with the river. So, there are other sources of funding for any physical work that we might need to
I
do.
would suspect the physical work on the river, which is there, needs to be done, is probably a lot more money than $42,000.
Potentially. Forrest, I noticed, you did a nice job breaking down your budget. Mileage is lower than I would expect for coming back and forth from Portland, or is there a reason for that?
You mean the cost?
Baseline monitoring.
Yeah, we use the federal rate, which I think is 58.5 cents now when we calculate that from Portland. So, I think that's pretty accurate.
So it's maybe like 6 or 7 trips from Portland to Camden? Or,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep. I think six trips is what's listed in there.
Okay.
Allison?
so with the funding, if we do end up getting the grant that we applied for, I think there's a possibility that this could be covered through that, or a portion of it could be covered through that, because baseline monitoring would be, a potential thing that they'd be willing to fund. The other thing that with the bacteria has been a really big concern for just Camden residents over the summer. Shirt Tail is the location on the river that we've had the most problems with, and it's a really popular swimming area. But there doesn't seem to be anything in here that's going to be more robust data gathering there. We do testing of the beaches on Tuesdays, which sometimes corresponds with a rain event and sometimes doesn't, which just leaves a lot of questions sometimes about whether the source of the bacteria. Would there be any way to use this process to improve the understanding that we have of the bacteria problem?
Yeah, there actually would be, and in terms of sort of cost and amount of labor that's needed to collect bacteria samples, it's relatively simple. It's a grab sample, take it to the lab within 6 hours, and get your results. So yeah, that's something we could add at almost no cost if we wanted to continue to collect those E. coli samples.
Yeah, I think it'd be easy to find if having volunteers were any kind of a help for that process too. That would be easy, but it would be nice to beef up the understanding that we have with that problem too.
Other questions?
I have.
Stephanie?
So, in looking at this for this week, my thought process is more on the problem that we have going on with the town. It isn't just the river or the dam. The problem is we've let this situation divide our community. And we've allowed it to just kind of jack up this distrust amongst the people and the town employees and us as the select board. And I frankly don't care if we do anything if we do not, first and foremost, put the trust of the community first on the list. That was promised with the task force, and I do not want to see any more contracts signed, any funding given until that task force is formed and has a chance to also review everything that they have and also comes forward and says, yes, we agree that this is what is needed. I just think that that is something that we need to think about and decide if the task force would be a good use of forming a plan of what may be needed now and what might be needed in the future, instead of doing a piecemeal plan throughout. If we could have a little bit more of, this is missing, this part is missing, this part is missing. Here's your list of things that we would like to have in the next, let's say, 2 years, instead of having it being a fragmented portion here and there. It's just really difficult to look at it and say, yes, this is needed, but then have the task force review it and say, well, this is also really needed, and that's also going to cost $80,000.
Allison.
So, yeah, I mean, I can definitely see why it feels like that, because it's being brought up, within the larger context of river restoration. I do think that it's important to look also at just, all of the work the town has done in the past. If you look at our comprehensive plan, it identifies water quality in Camden Harbor and our beaches as an ongoing concern. We have one of the most, Camden Harbor, Lake Beach is one of the most polluted in the state of Maine during rain events. We had an intern a couple of years ago who did some testing. They're looking for all these different sources of this major bacteria problem that we have in the harbor. And at the end of her time, she started doing some testing of the river and found that the levels were like way higher in terms of bacteria coming from the river than any other source. And so I think that, yeah, there's division in terms of the dams and all of that, but basic water quality is a concern to all Camden residents. I don't hear from anybody that they want to know less about the water quality, throughout the watershed. And so I guess I see this as an opportunity to address some of those things that are just completely independent of the, we'd like to know how much dissolved oxygen is in the river in different places, no matter, what we do with the dams. I think we should be doing the same thing at Hosmer Pond. But anyway, I don't think I think if we were going to ditch one part of this, it would be you could get rid of the whole river restoration thing and we should still do this.
I'm not trying to say ditch it.
Oh, I know you're not. I'm just saying that,
we need to just maybe pump the brakes a little bit and do the phase 2 before we jump to phase 3 of what was first brought to us, as far as getting the task force together to also come into agreement and bring it forth as a collective whole to say, this is what we really think. I'm not saying that we don't need it. I'm just saying I really would like to hear it from the group as a whole. That
I think the task force, though, is going to want to have some basic data, and it's going to be unfortunate for the task force to be sitting around talking about, the river and various things and have to say, we don't have these are like very basic things that we're really behind in terms of the level of water quality monitoring.
I'm not sure that this is going to be the only thing that they come forward with.
No, definitely.
So I would like to see a list, because we had a fragmented process when we did the snowball process, and we're still living with the consequences from that.
Tom?
Forrest, how soon would we see the results of this proposal and the tests that you propose to perform?
Yeah, after the end of the sampling season, so the results would be in the fall. and, there's some analysis that needs to happen, and we'd literally be talking about hundreds of thousands of data points that you'd be dealing with, and so, it could happen during part of this task force process, this initial project. I don't know if that's what you're asking.
It is. I'd like to know if the task force would be able to use this data. Obviously, select board and residents could have access to this data as well while the task force is still in session.
Yeah, so the answer would be yes to that.
We're trying to build a public data set, actually, because I know there's a lot of people who would be excited about, checking the health of the river and making the data public. If I can.
I had Stephanie's hand was up.
Okay.
Come on. Yeah, please. Then Sophie.
My name is Stephanie Smith. I'm a Camden resident. I live on Washington Street, and I swim in the river regularly. I also serve on the board of the Natural Resource Council of Maine, so I'm quite disturbed to hear that our town hasn't tested these elements of our water in so long. And I would be in full support of moving this forward so we have data that many other towns routinely test. Also, I just have a question on how the Megunticook Watershed Association's involved, because they do some water testing. So how are you all coordinating?
Correct. They test for bacteria. There's a whole, they don't do anything more than bacteria that I'm aware of, and probably they do the Secchi disc
That's what they've done in the
water
harbor.
clarity.
That's what they've done in the harbor, is just bacteria. Yeah, I think it's important to recognize a couple of points. One is, 2 years ago, this summer, that we had a group that was doing daily sampling of our harbor for some of the same impetus, because we hadn't, even though there was testing done on a weekly basis or so when there was summer by other agencies, we didn't have the data of the fluctuations that occur with various events, and that data was rather eye-opening for the town. We were a little late in getting that information to the town, but this is an overall quality issue. It's like air quality, but I certainly agree with you, Stephanie.
Sorry, and to answer the question about Megunticook Watershed, they only do, they do Barrett's Cove and Shirt Tail. So they do the lake and the above Seabright, but there's nothing that's done below the Seabright Dam.
Yeah, I agree.
And maybe Holly knows more, but.
They do Hosmer Pond as well.
Right, but different.
Right. But I agree with Stephanie. I totally agree with what you said. This the whole task force created and the term gap analysis has been used here to say, these are the gaps we see. This one is, that's why I asked the question to Forrest about, the data from here will help. Would it help basically the advisory group to better define the rest of the gap analysis that's more efficiently? I heard yes. And that's the difference because water quality is like air quality. It's something there's certain things we should be doing, period, regardless of the restoration of the river or Megunticook project. This is something we honestly should have done 2 years ago. We probably should have had the same crew doing, various spots in the river.
We talked about it before. It's only ever been
we talked about it. We never followed through with it. So I think this is one of those gray zone items that would be nice to have data. But again, I'm relying on you for saying that basically this information will be an advantage to better define the gap analysis as we move forward with our advisory task group, whatever we're calling them.
Yeah, and it's the basic keystone data that you need to assess a river.
Okay. Other comments, board?
The loggers that we're going to purchase through a separate entity, potentially. Is there a long-term benefit for the town, Forrest? Is that something we can use in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we recommended those. We have, used these loggers ourselves, purchased them ourselves for many years. The lifespan is probably a decade. For these loggers, so it's an upfront capital cost, and hopefully something that can be used for years and years. There's also the potential that a group like the Megunticook Watershed Association, could be, trained to help in the future. Some of the work is pretty complex and you have to have, sort of special state training, but, there might be some ways to help and reduce future costs. So, we have plenty of work. We're a busy company and, we appreciate that, a long-term, I hate to see the monitoring just happen for 1 year. It's really something that needs to happen annually in a continuous data set.
And how is data collected from the loggers?
There's a shuttle that's used that you basically attach. You have to, basically go into the water, retrieve the shuttle, clean it because it gets fouled a lot, and then you take the data off. You download the data using the shuttle. And then you put the logger back in the water and it keeps going. So will actually be getting data points along the way each time we're there.
And if the town wanted to continue to use those, there's a particular set of software that comes with it, or that we'd have to purchase separately?
Yeah, no, that comes with it. Good question, and it's fairly easy to use. Hobo has its own software that they give you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess,
Thank you.
To sort of add to what Forrest is saying, this would really be setting up a testing program and protocol. And we have to test water quality anyway through having a wastewater treatment plant. So we have people that are trained to do it. We have, a lab to do it. So, it's really something that we can maintain into the future and expand on, but we really need, kind of help in getting started in the first place since we're.
And the loggers can be used in other locations also in the town.
Yeah.
Would that be the intention, is to have the wastewater department use these continuing
It would
forward?
be someone, they would have a role in it because of, they're trained to gather the water samples and they have a lab and everything. So they'll have a role in it. Going forward, it's hard to say exactly who will be doing it, but, this kind of sets us up so that we can in the future.
I think we ought to, and I don't know who makes that decision, maybe it's us, but at some point define that. If we do approve this proposal, we own this equipment, it sounds like this could be useful equipment for us, and get somebody on the town staff trained. Maybe there's a volunteer that wants to be involved. Certainly there's some people with professional expertise that might have a significant interest that might be willing to help.
Yeah, as I said earlier, the significant part of the cost is the loggers, which we own, and we'll be able to utilize. That's an advantage for other water things we need to be continuing to monitor.
Yeah, I know the Hosmer Pond, I went to the Hosmer Pond Association annual meeting over I guess it was the weekend, and there was a lot of discussion with them about how they can beef up the monitoring and how the town could help, and I definitely think that's our responsibility to do that.
With that,
Vote on this.
we have to, I need a motion to approve or disapprove or whatever the board would like to do.
So I make a motion that we approve the budget for $54,339 to start collecting the data in the Megunticook River and a monitoring process. And the sourcing, the funding sources will be AUDRA coming from the Megunticook River contingency
Reserve.
and
The 42,000.
42,000.
for 42,000, and we'll figure out
We'll carry it forward.
We'll carry forward the
24.
balance into 2040. And also keeping in mind that one of the things we want to do is include the monitoring in any projects we have for the river, just to find costs.
Do I have a
That's
second?
the motion I'm making.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. Discussion. All's in favor? Opposed? 4-1. Thank you. Motion carries. We'll move on to, thank you, Forrest, for your time tonight. I think your substantial duties are done for the moment. We'll be seeing you a lot, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you for
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, too. The next item on the agenda is the extension of the license privilege for the Norumbega Inn. Audra, do you want to intro that?
Yes, so this is, again, with liquor licensing, it's all issued by the state. So the
Right.
select board is just making a recommendation to the state. And this really would allow the Norumbega to sell alcohol in a designated outdoor area for special events only. And I believe there's just one special event that's planned that would be allowed by approval of extending this license.
Right. Just for everybody's edification, when any restaurant or business, a good example would be like 40 Paper, they have a liquor license that allows them to have serve liquor on that front area outdoors, was part of their application. If it hadn't been, they would have to modify their liquor license. And that's kind of in a sense what's going on here for the events that may occur with Norumbega, which they have, 80 a year allowed or something like that. Allison, you had your hand up before I opened my big mouth.
Oh, no. I wasn't sure if you were going to say anything or not.
Okay.
Yeah, so is this would only extend those privileges until the next cycle where their liquor license or special amusement permits are?
That has to be approved every year?
Looking at the site plan, it's like a pretty big tent that's pretty far away from Norumbega. It actually seems to be closer to the neighboring house than it is to Norumbega. So I just want to make sure that there was a little bit of concern about it being a permanent change or.
We have to review the license every year.
Okay.
I agree with Allison. We did receive an email from a neighbor that asked us to make sure that it was temporary so that it can be assessed for noise and other purposes. I think that's a reasonable request.
Yeah, to that question about noise ordinances, absolutely. That every ordinance we have in the town applies to the town. And if there are violations of an ordinance, yeah, they're going to be enforced, and they should be. We've had that issue with other entities in town where noise was of concern. That there exists a noise ordinance, and certainly, I believe there are new owners of this facility at Norumbega. They should be certainly apprised of the fact that there is a noise ordinance, but they also commented on their, the biggest thing for the liquor license part is they must maintain the alcohol in that zone. They can't have people running all over I think it's 4 acres there. It's a big chunk of land. That's not allowed. That's not.
And I guess,
I didn't see you. Good to see you again. You'd like to speak in a minute. I just wanted to make sure.
And I guess to make another point, this was a choice they're making because they want to be the ones, selling the alcohol. They have control of the situation.
Yep.
They could hire a caterer and this wouldn't come to the board for approval at all. I could just sign off on it.
Correct.
So I just want to make the point that by doing this, they're subjecting themselves to a additional level of control and scrutiny so that they can, So anyway, that being said, let him answer questions.
I didn't recognize our friend here, but please, this is your facility, and I would hope that we're all in this town can talk to each other openly about issues, and if anybody has an issue, they know where you live.
Absolutely, they do. I live there. I'm Will, the new owner of the Norumbega. You're exactly right. Sorry about that. We have a wedding coming up on Labor Day weekend. Normally, if we were doing a wedding, the caterer would probably provide the alcohol. In this instance, the Norumbega is providing the alcohol. Hence, we need the extension of license the premises to expand to the yard so that we can sell the liquor from the tent. I understand what you said about the tent being closest to the neighboring houses. That's actually the flattest part of the Norumbega site and the only part of the yard that currently could accommodate a tent that size. It's a 60-person wedding. The tent's about 30 by 60. And you're also correct, it's the only special event that we have like this planned for this season.
Go ahead, Sophie.
I have a question actually, because the request says that it's a permanent extension of privilege.
I believe it's for a year, so that if we had more, we
Permanent
wouldn't
is
have
just
to
for a
come
year.
back every time.
So what would be temporary just for one? And you
Yeah, that I think it's the application that's confusing and concerning.
So say, they were only planning on having, events for the month of, or just for the summer or whatever. Then, if it was a constrained period of time, they could put that it was temporary and, it only give them privileges to have a liquor license during those periods of time. But I think, the way that they filled out the application, they put permanent because they're not planning on doing that much for the rest of the year anyway.
Permanent means for the
For the
period
duration
of,
the license.
Of the license.
almost like if we would just change the wording of that a little bit, it would,
Yeah, that's probably
there's
true.
really nothing, there's very little that's
This is a
permanent
state-
about.
This is a
State
state form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I agree with
Driven
you,
by
it is confusing.
insurance.
It is confusing, but it is a one-year thing. We'll be acting on it again next year. Back to just again, the comment I made, I didn't know you were here, I apologize.
It's okay.
We do have a noise ordinance in the town, and it is enforced. If a neighbor should have a problem, they're going to talk to the police department about certain noise levels at certain times, and et cetera, et cetera. Just want to make sure you're aware, because you're a relatively new resident, but I've lived here for a number of years, and I don't remember all the ordinances, and I'm sitting here.
Yes,
But,
I've seen
yeah.
the noise ordinance.
Okay, that's my only point there. But thank you very much.
No problem.
Right.
Thank you all.
Dennis. Mr. Dennis. Yes, please. You know the drill.
Dennis McGurk, Camden, Maine. My house is adjacent to their backyard,
Yep.
and so that's why I'm here. I would live there for 22 years, and and we hope that the new owners are successful. It'd be good for them, be good for the town. I want to make sure that this is a temporary approval because in the past, not them, but prior owners have had events like that, weddings back there, and one of the neighbors no longer in the neighborhood had to call the police because it was so bad. Since then, we have a noise ordinance, which I'm quite familiar with since I wrote it for the town.
No comment.
Okay. One of the things that's missing from our noise ordinance is anything other than sustained noises. One of the things that happened the last time, which caused a problem for the inn across the street, Little Dream Inn, was after the party was over, the staff came out and cleared up all of the debris and so forth, and wound up throwing a lot of bottles into the bin, which does not get covered by the noise ordinance because it's not that kind of a sound. It's too short to be measured by the normal dBA measurement techniques, but it is very disturbing and kept their guests awake at night. So I just wanted to alert the new owners to consequences of activities associated with the event.
Sure.
And to make sure, let's give them a temporary license, see how things go, and if everything works fine, then that'd be fine. But once you grant a permanent license for the rest of the year, all of the other events could be the same, and it would be hard to withdraw it. So that was why I recommended it be temporary.
Thank you.
And I wanted to mention the supplemental aspect of the noise ordinance, since we started out with a fairly comprehensive one and pared it down to what is now in the police ordinance, which is quite brief, but still effective.
Yep. Thank you, Dennis.
All right.
Leave that on? Okay.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. I'm new. I'm Gary Wolschlager, and I am at 12 Nuremberg Drive. I bought the Knapp's house.
Yep.
We've been here about 15 months. Our primary residence is in Pasadena, California, where we had the same issue with the Rose Bowl and the neighbors that surround it. Here I come here to have this pristine location, and I find that a tent's going to be stuck in my backyard because my backyard looks up at your containers up there. And I just wanted your propane tanks.
The propane tanks are on the north side.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we see them from our house.
Okay, please continue.
Okay. So I just wanted to make it known my feelings about this because I'm going to be looking at this tent. And I had planned on buying a property that a tent could be in the backyard. And that wasn't disclosed to me by the agent that sold me the house that that was a possibility. But I think you've become an owner since that time. But the things that I wrote down that I just wanted you to be aware of is that, as Dennis mentioned, is this a conditional use permit or a permanent permit? And from what I've been told, it's happening for,
Clear here, what's on the table is a one-year permit.
yes, that's what I'm hearing. I finally heard that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like to know, with this permit, if it's an annual permit, is that permit starting once it's issued in September till next September?
What are the dates on the application? Audrey, do you have
I
it?
believe it's August.
I believe it's August 1st.
12.
Okay. So from August to August, okay?
No, the start date is September 1st.
Okay.
Through August 31st.
Well, my question would be, of the owners of the inn, what would the number of events be? Are they allowed so many in that given year? And if so, how many would there be?
I believe the allowance is 8, is that correct, Audrey? In that area, it's 8.
8.
8, I believe.
And
Which has been the case.
Which has been the case forever there.
has
It's
it
nothing
been?
new.
So the
You
10
know,
could have gone up before this.
Yeah,
That was the case before you bought your property.
Yeah, and FYI, I own a number of acres myself in Camden, and people who bought around me, if I want to put up a tent and do something, I can do it too.
Assuming that most of the events that would be held would probably be in the summer months from May through September. I don't think you're going to have too many others. That's why I go back to California. Okay. But if that's the case, we can conceivably have 2 events every month,
I
right?
see.
And if that's the case, would these all be outside events, or would these be special events that would be only inside?
They already have had permission to do the special events
correct.
outside.
That's correct. This
Okay.
is nothing new.
Okay, well, it's new to me,
difference
so I'm just trying
Yeah,
to,
I understand
selling
that,
their own
but-
alcohol.
and I can't address your broker problems, but one of the things I would encourage everybody is, in these situations, have a conversation with the owner.
exactly right. I'm perfectly in agreement with that.
That's where it starts to me,
Okay.
because we're neighbors. I know, I have a high degree of faith that the trust of working with the neighbors is in the heart of the owner of Norumbega, as was the past owner. So I think a lot of the questions can be answered.
And I think that's very true. I wanted to know about what the limit to the guests could be.
Sure.
And the guests that are limited, does that include the serving staff and all the people that move the cars around? I wanted to know about the noise level situation, and I think we've somewhat addressed that to a point.
Yep.
I wanted to know about the location of the porta potties that are going to be out there relative to where my house is, and is there an odor coming from those? Is there a fire department access to these things? Because there's a lot of as I put down here, windfall that is on that side of the property. And if a fire starts, it's going to be hard to put out. And you know what's up against the back of my
This
property?
was all dealt with when they got their
Yeah.
initial.
Yeah, this has already been, all these items you're asking have already been crossed in previous years with the previous owners, by the way. So this is nothing new. Again, if you want some information, please feel free to contact the town manager and give you some of this background. Again, I suggest some of these, besides the fire department questions, which is the town, to talk with the owner and
Well, that's fine, because-
understand the basis of which he bought the property on the previous allowances for these kinds of events.
Okay. Because I've got a lot of pine trees back there. And
It's
I'm
beautiful.
concerned about
It's a beautiful property.
there'd be a problem there,
Yeah,
okay?
understood.
Is there, and obviously we've discussed this, and that's why we'll discuss it directly with you, about there being a concern about the surrounding neighborhood.
Sure.
And we will be dealing
Sure.
with that. And I was wanting to know, have there been precedents been established by the board regarding existing B&Bs with food services,
Yes.
restaurants,
Yes.
commercial ventures, what have you? Is this something that is brand new, or has this already been set up? before?
No, I said about 3 times now, this has been an existing situation with Norumbega. This is not new.
I'm
So-
talking about the surrounding B&Bs.
There's a lot, if you go on the Town of Camden YouTube channel, there are a lot of meetings that this has been talked about, in particular with Norumbega. Even if you just Google it, you could get some background on the history of them being allowed to serve dinner, and it was discussed quite a
Well, I
lot. So
read
there's
the
a lot.
article.
There's a lot out there.
There's an article that you put out September of,
Actually,
2019,
Dennis could probably help you with that.
regarding
You know, it
This
might
being
be,
allowed
it might
to have-
be easier if you send an email to me with all these questions, and then I could respond to you and give you links to, you know, meetings and
Okay,
documents.
that's fine. All right, I appreciate that.
Sure.
And so, okay, well, the